First, let's address the elephant in the room. No, it has not been since the last time I submitted a video that I've shaved. It's just sort of a challenge my college does for the guys that they grow their facial hair out from November to February. It's kind of a fun thing. Wanted to try it this year. Anyways. Also, my room's not on fire. This is an old phone and my camera quality is really bad. So if it looks kind of smoky in the corners, I'm okay. But yeah, no, with high school, senior year in college and everything, I did not really have any time to upload videos. And you know what? I was thinking, I do so much schoolwork in college, so much reading, and it really made me miss and appreciate independent reading. And so I wanted to talk about the books that I read this year, just for funsies, and rank them, because I love to rank things. And so I want to have a disclaimer, there's going to be a bottom one. That does not mean that it is the worst one. That does not mean, well, it does mean it's the worst one. It doesn't mean that I disliked it, though. It's just simply, these are the books that I ranked from what I prefer the least to best. So, let's begin. So in 11th place, a book that taught me that if you really like a movie that is based off of a book, and you choose to read the book, there might be some differences. And that book is actually a movie that was one of the last videos I talked about, and that is Runaway Jury by John Grisham. I really liked the movie, as you could tell, so I wanted to read the book. And the plot of the book is slightly similar to the movie. The case is different. And it's kind of not as interesting of a case. Still the same, premise of the Runaway Jury. Just because the case is different, it was just not as exciting. I mean, the movie was very thrilling and very action-packed. And this just wasn't as action-packed. I definitely enjoyed it. But this almost kind of read more like a 550-page long brief on a case that had some shenanigans going on. Coming in the number 10 spot, we have a classic whodunit, and that is Agatha Christie's Death on the Nile. I read Murder on the Orient Express a long time ago, and I really enjoyed it. I did not enjoy this one as much. That is also saying a lot, because I did quite enjoy Murder on the Orient Express. I honestly can't really describe why this one is so low for me. Kind of like I said, these are all really good books that I really enjoyed. These all got my stamp of approval. It's just some had to be at the bottom. I think there might be some kind of pros and cons comparing Death on the Nile and Orient Express. I think I prefer the setting to Orient Express, but I think some of the characters in Death on the Nile are a lot more interesting than some of the characters in Orient Express. I love Colonel Race. I think he's a super cool kind of sidekick to Poirot in this book. Probably one of the easier reads of the books that I read. So if you're kind of new to the mystery genre, I honestly would recommend Christie. But yeah, this was just, it was a good one. I mean, at number 9, we actually have a big shocker for me, because I love Kurt Vonnegut. He's one of my favorite authors. Love his prose and love his creativity and these worlds he creates and his sense of humor. His books are like candy for me. And I thought this one, because it's Vonnegut, would be at the top of the list. Ended up being near the bottom. That is Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut. I believe one of his more well-known and popular novels. And Slaughterhouse-Five is leagues higher for me than Cat's Cradle. I think this one, it's such a short read. I mean, you could literally read this in one sitting. There's just something about it. I don't know if it was that it was too crazy. If you like Kurt Vonnegut, definitely read this. It's a little bit one of his more bleak novels, for sure. And I think maybe that's why I didn't like it as much. But it's very, very, very Kurt Vonnegut. Now at the number 8 spot, we have the only nonfiction novel that I read this year. It's not a novel. It's actually a psychology book called The Psychology of Survivor edited by Richard J. Gehrig. So there's a bunch of different psychologists and scientists that contributed to this book. It's just a series of essays, kind of an anthology of essays comparing elements of the show Survivor to actual psychological concepts. Super interesting. Psychology and Survivor are two of my favorite things. And so this is a perfect book for me. I'm not a huge nonfiction fan. I know that's a big fault of myself. This was a nonfiction book that I just lapped up. If you like psychology, if you like Survivor, or if you just want to read something really random, this is literally such a fascinating read. The only thing that I'd say, and this is not a fault of it, it is very outdated. It only covers the first like 12 or 13 seasons of the show, and there's been soon to be 50. So they definitely should please write a sequel to this. I'm already on my second stack because there's a lot of these. Well, there's not that many. There's 11, but they're all really thick for some reason. And let's keep it going at number, what are we at now? I think it's 8. I don't remember. The next one we got is The Lost World by Michael Crichton. This, of course, is the sequel to Jurassic Park. I read Jurassic Park back in high school, and I really loved it, so I wanted to read The Lost World as well. And kind of, again, with the theme of the book not being anything to do with the movie, I've not seen the Lost World movie, but I've played the Lego game, so I know roughly the plot and, like, the characters, and this is very not exactly the same as the movie, at least based on my understanding of the movie. That being said, still a fantastic read. I did not like it as much as the original Jurassic Park, but, I mean, I could not put this down. I think I read this entire thing cover to cover in like 4 days. Super thrilling read. So if you're into science fiction, or if you're a fan of the series, or if you like dinosaurs, very, very good book. All right, this next one's a doozy. I have a love-hate relationship with Dan Brown because he writes very captivating books. You know, you can't put them down. He also writes, what he writes is kind of controversial a little bit, and you know, his books, especially, you know, the Da Vinci Code, yeah, very good book, one of my favorite books, kind of hard to read at times, and so I read his Angels and Demons, which is actually the first book in the series. I did not realize this because the way Da Vinci Code is written, it's as if, yeah, you're kind of introduced, oh, you're familiar with Robert Langdon, but maybe that's just how he's written. They don't really do a proper exposition of him for, artistic effect. But no, this is actually the first book. And it is very fast-paced. The entire book, I mean, this is 700 pages, and it all takes place over the course of like 6 hours. I mean, this is, I think, the most I've been invested in a book. Like, I'm constantly reading this. Just as a heads up, it is gruesome. It is maybe the most gruesome book I've ever read. So if you're a little bit squeamish with that, I would read with caution. I'm very mad at this book because of how it ends, which I won't spoil the ending, but they had a perfect ending, and I was like, well, this is weird, because there's like 100 pages left in the book, and they retcon everything with maybe the dumbest twist ending I have ever read. So, it was a good book, and it would be higher, very good book, very much enjoyed it. It would be much higher on my list if it wasn't for that horrible ending. All right, at the number 5 spot, we got a classic novel. I always want to read classic literature, right? Like, I'm always telling myself, I want to read more classic literature, and I don't always get around to it. I go to, Half Price Books or Barnes and Noble, and I'm like, I'm gonna buy classic literature, and then I end up walking out with not classic literature. But I did get a really good one, and it is Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. This book is also a beast, and I love his sense of humor. Maybe one of my favorite writing styles I've ever read. It is also very Vonnegut-ian. I don't know if that's a word, but it's a word now. Really, it's such a long, kind of just strenuous story for the protagonist. I don't think I've ever read a protagonist that has suffered quite like Yossarian, just because everything that could go wrong happens to him in just a really comical level. I mean, the whole point of Catch-22 is a paradox, right? And I just love how paradoxes occur so much in the writing and the dialogue. It feels like a lot of conversations in this book feel very cyclical. Like, the conversation will be several lines long between two characters, and it ends basically where they started. And it's just so, the characters and the things that they say and the dialogue is so, it's just hilarious. But it's also very grim. Has just a very, just beginning to end. It's like that feeling when a plane lands and it just feels very bumpy. I don't know why I use that description. It's just a very, it's a bumpy ride, Catch-22 is. At number 4, we have a huge curveball. Really big surprise. It's a book, first of all, before I show it to you, because I'm be willing to bet money on it, that very few of you have ever seen this book before. This is by no means a popular book. This is probably the least popular book on this list. I got this book in the young adults fiction section of Half Price Books. And it was one of those things where I'd never heard of it before. But as soon as I saw it, I knew I needed to have it for one specific reason that will become very apparent to you as soon as I show you the cover. And that is The Divide by Elizabeth Kay. And you notice, look at this cover. I've never seen anything like this. And I was like, I don't care what this book is about. I'm going to read it. And I did read it over the summer. I read it actually while I was in Ireland. And it's a fantasy novel. It's a fantasy novel very much like it's a boy who is sick and he is transported to this very kind of Middle-earthian style fiction land. And probably my favorite thing about this book is the fact that to the fictional characters in this fictional world, humans are considered kind of, whoa, never seen you before. And, like, my favorite thing is when they say, like, wait, you're a human, can you do science? Like, they treat humans and science the same way we treat wizards and magic. And I think that's really enchanting. I just found this book as a whole to be super enchanting. And that's why it's so hot. Man, I really wish I'd gotten into this when I was a kid. So if you're younger and you like Harry Potter, highly recommend this. It's also part of a trilogy, which I did not realize, but I'm very glad that it is. Now, we are at our top 3. Going from the least popular book on this list to probably the most popular. At number 3, we have The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I'm kind of ashamed that I didn't really start to get into the Tolkien books until this year. I tried reading Lord of the Rings when I was in 6th grade. Bad idea. So I was like, I'm going to start with The Hobbit. And The Hobbit is fantastic. I absolutely adore Tolkien's his writing style, his creativity. Very similar. I know I'm saying this is like the exact same reasons I like Vonnegut, right? But Tolkien is such a different, like, unlike anything. People say that theorize that Harry Potter was not written by a single person because, there's no way the Harry Potter universe could be conceived by one person. Well, there's no way the Middle-earth, the Lord of the Rings universe was created by one person. But guess what? It was. And it was J.R. I forgot what the letters stand for. J.R.R. Tolkien. Fantastic writer. It's kind of funny probably hearing someone gush about maybe like one of the most iconic writers of all time. I'm not one to get emotional reading books. It's just not really something that I'm programmed to do. But I got really emotional reading the ending of this book. It's just so well written, and it's so... it's maybe one of the single greatest adventures that I've ever read. However, there's one book that tops The Hobbit. Well, there are 2 technically, but one book specifically, and that's The Lord of the Rings, because I'm actually just reading the entire series. So I finished The Lord of the Rings. It's actually the most recent book that I read. I finished this like a few days ago. I put this one above because I feel like I did enjoy Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, more than The Hobbit, just by a little bit. Some people will say that the Lord of the Rings trilogy is a more difficult read than The Hobbit, which I would agree. These books they're much more detailed. They're longer, obviously, than The Hobbit. The print is smaller. I think that's kind of where the differences lie. I mean, they're written by the same person, so you're getting the same prose. You're getting the same universe, the same writing style. Maybe he does throw a few more locations and names at you in these books that might make it a little bit harder to follow. But I think really what you got to do with that is just have sort of the judgment on, okay, well, what's the most important to read, most important to understand of those, and what isn't. And this was such a fantastic read. People also fight all the time, I feel like, about, what's better between Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter? I love both series, but I think that honestly they're kind of incomparable, because this is just so much more everything that Tolkien writes is so much more in depth and kind of sort of profound than Harry Potter in terms of inspirational and motivational moments. Right, there might be a few like Dumbledore quotes from Harry Potter that we put on your Pinterest board for inspiration. You could put the entire text of The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings, because there's so much to be inspired by from these books, and I think that's part of the reason why I love them so much. And finally, at the number 1 spot, we have the best book that I read all year. That is The Book Thief by Marcus Zuzak. Marcus Zuzak is one of my all-time favorite authors. He can take, a plot as heavy as The Book Thief, right? And make it obviously super compelling. But he can also, my first exposure to him was I Am the Messenger. Another fantastic book. I highly recommend you read it. But those are two very different plots, but he makes both of them like so compelling. I will say, just as a heads up, this is a very heavy book. This is a very serious toned, very depressing, very sad book. It's set during Nazi Germany during World War II, and it follows a little girl who is kind of growing up in Germany and kind of slowly starting to realize, that what's going on, what they're doing is wrong, and sort of kind of rejecting that. And one of the ways that she rejects that is through literature. There's themes of censorship and how she realizes that censorship is bad. And it gets so much deeper than that. I won't go any further because I highly recommend everyone read this. Honestly, it's such such an emotionally rich, probably the most emotionally rich book that I've read this year, because there's really high moments and really joyful moments, through the eyes of the protagonist. And this is a very sad book, a very kind of bleak book. But I remember finishing this and just being like chills. So very rightfully, this is the best book that I've read this year.